Overwatch 2 just isn't the game I fell in love with. I first started playing Overwatch during its first open beta on PS4. I didn't like it at the time, but my friend insisted that it would be amazing at launch. Once the game officially released, I gave it another shot. My friend and I met a few others while grinding out levels in order to unlock the competitive mode, and that became our consistent 6-stack. Prior to this, I had only ever played Call of Duty, Battlefield, or Halo casually, so this was the first time I jumped into a ranked mode for an FPS. At the time, we didn't have the traditional Bronze to Grandmaster rankings, but instead it was a numerical rank from 1 to 100, 1 being the worst and 100 being the best. I was a group support player, playing mostly Lucio, but when we weren't playing in a 6-stack, I learned to flex onto the tank role as well, Reinhardt and Zarya being my go-to choices. We were able to reach around high 70s, low 80s, which was around high masters and low GM. But back then, you never saw anyone higher than 85 aside from literally 2 or 3 people. Our DPS player was actually one of the first people to get top 500, with the old icon being a white bar and a gold ranked icon in the middle. Most people don't even remember that icon because it was so long ago and it was only there for the first competitive season. I was obsessed with grinding rank and getting better. I remember watching the OGN Apex tournaments in Korea hosted by Monty and Doa, and seeing Team Envious versus Lunatic High. Our 6-stack pulled all-nighters, stream sniping, and Q dodging teams. It was one of the greatest gaming experiences I've ever had. Season 5 rolls around and this was when some of our 6-stack moved to PC. Unfortunately for me at the time, I couldn't afford a PC, so I stayed on console and played on alt accounts with my friends, who were in the metal ranks. Eventually, Overwatch 2 dropped. I finally moved to PC where I hovered around Diamond and Masters for tank and support respectively. There are a lot of conversations and debates regarding the strength of tank synergies and how they affected all levels of play, claiming that they were overpowered. As someone who spent a lot of time playing at the average ranks with friends, this is not true. During open queue, many players were already set that 2-2-2 was the most optimal composition. Anytime that there was more than 2 tanks, one of the quote-unquote extra tank players would switch off and play either DPS or support. Tank heavy comps like Quad Tank and Goats were rarely ever run because of this, and when it was ran, it was only when AoE healing supports were added later. Especially because most players at this level loved playing Ana Moira, a support comp that pumped out a lot of healing but lacked the utility required from Lucio to actually help the tank heavy compositions in engagements and disengagements. This misconception of tanks being the problem was only valid when Orisa and Sigma were added to the game, because these heroes were fundamentally more well equipped to cover their own weaknesses rather than having 2 tanks having niche strengths and covering each other's weaknesses. But even then, the real source of tanks being unkillable in Overwatch 1 were the support heroes that were added after the game's launch, namely Moira, Brigitte, and Baptiste, on top of the overly kitted tanks. This was around the time where I stopped playing altogether. I loved playing Reinhardt and being able to outskill the enemy team even when they ran counters including Orisa. Nothing felt more satisfying than facing off in a Rein mirror, beating your counterpart, watching them switch to Orisa and still losing. Until Orisa was buffed and Sigma could do everything. At this point, Orisa and Sigma started getting more value than Reinhardt with less effort, and I just didn't find it fun anymore. Sounds familiar to today's issues with counter swapping, doesn't it? That's the real reason why tank queues were always instant. My ability and skill expression were reduced in favor of stronger tanks at the skill floor, and I just did not want to play them. As I briefly mentioned Orisa and Sigma's fundamentally flawed hero design, this would continue to be the case for the support heroes that were added later, all of which shared one thing in common: AoE healing and how easily it was to dish out that healing. During the release of Brig, I was a Rein player. For those of you who were there, you know exactly what this meant. Brig was able to shield bash me with practically no cost whatsoever. The same goes for her healing. All you had to do was proc Inspire and be the team's anchor, and the amount of healing she would do for free was insane. But to be completely fair, the average rank was really bad with her. Many of you at this rank have probably seen Brig players that bash in, use all their cooldowns, frontline, and then do the slow retreat of shame while spamming for heals. They still do this now in Overwatch 2. Even though most players were really bad at playing her, this doesn't take away the fact that her kit was overtuned and she got an incredible value at all ranks for relatively low risk. This was the case for Moira and Baptiste as well, both of which were able to pump out large amounts of AoE healing with very little drawback, as well as Bap's Immortality Field, where you could just throw it around a corner and you wouldn't have to think about disengaging. You could simply sit there, get super healed, and not have to think. Lucio has AoE healing, but the output was very low. The trade-off for this though was that he had the option to speed his team. Ana's nade did burst AoE healing, but that left her vulnerable for a dive if she used it improperly. So yes, while Orisa and Sigma were problematic, they would not be nearly as much of an issue had it not been for the support hero design on top of their own overtuned kit. All of these points being a balance and design issue, not a format issue. I have never heard a single time where players wanted a tank to be removed in order to solve the overpowered tank problem. So I genuinely do not understand where people make the correlation of 6v6 being the reason for why metas like double shield were relevant. This could have been easily solvable through balance, and I know that is a term that gets thrown around very freely. However, every tank prior to Orisa and Sigma typically had one way to mitigate or deny damage. Orisa and Sigma had two. Orisa having both a shield and fortify, while Sigma also had a shield and grasp, reducing the need to cover for each other's weaknesses and being more self-sufficient, leading them to become super tanks. Had tanks like Ramattra and Junker Queen been released during Overwatch 1, they would have been able to run over double shield easily. So to wrap up this point, yes, Orisa and Sigma were overtuned, but what really made them impressive were the AoE healing supports that made them immortal. Rein, Zarya, Winston, D.Va, Orisa, Hog. These were the tank synergies that many players from Overwatch 1 know by heart. Rein Zarya was ran very often in metal ranks, not because it was broken, but because the combo was fun. The same goes for Winston and D.Va. Coordinating dives and peeling each other for a disengage, that was fun. Orisa halting squishies and Hog hooking them was also kinda fun in a sick and twisted way. Just because these synergies found success doesn't mean they were oppressive. There were many instances where my team would run Rein Zarya and we would lose to comps like Hog Winston or Zarya Hog. There were even times during open queue where I would be the solo tank as Reinhardt and the enemy team would lock Orisa Hog, Bastion, Mei, and I was still able to perform well. Not because the role itself was overpowered, but because I looked for opportunities in the enemy team's playstyle that left them vulnerable in order to get value. I didn't even have to be the superstar. I just looked for ways to set my team up for team fights. So even when the enemy team would run tank synergies to counter, the game was all down to execution and skill expression. This is what I loved about Overwatch. Now, in Overwatch 2, since there's only one tank, the role had to be given insanely high stats to compensate for being the main target of CC and damage. Being a solo tank, I had to readjust and relearn the role, just like everyone else. I can no longer play hyper aggressively like I used to in Overwatch 1, but I had to be smarter with where I took fights. However, very soon after, I learned that this playstyle started bleeding into every other tank, and it all ended up boiling down to be everywhere at the same time while also not dying. This just isn't fun. A few seasons later, and I completely dropped playing tank because no matter what I did, my team would always blame me as the tank. It just wasn't fun. I started playing only support, and as someone who started out as a support main in Overwatch 1, this is going to rub a lot of support players the wrong way. But the support role is 100 times easier and less stressful in Overwatch 2. Sure, there was Season 1 where tanks were literally running over supports, but since then, the role has gotten so many buffs and quality of life changes, it has become far easier to get value for doing less. The amount of times where an enemy DPS would flank me while I was on BAP, I wouldn't even have to look at them. I continued healing my team, popping Immortality Field and Regen Burst because I knew the DPS wouldn't be able to kill me. Kiriko having the most broken abilities and ultimate in the game meant I could ignore obstacles the rest of the cast had to deal with. Lifeweaver just pumping out raw healing while having the survivability of a tank, the list goes on. Support became such an easy role I could turn my brain off, watch a video on my other monitor and still get value. It felt great at the time, but in hindsight, No character should be able to get away with what I was doing, and eventually I just got bored with the support role too. I couldn't even imagine what it must have felt like for a DPS player to go against so many powerful abilities given to the support role. That's when I decided to start playing DPS as well. I was never a DPS player because I know my aim just isn't good enough to provide enough value that my team needed, so I just stayed away from the role completely. But seeing how tank was miserable and support was just brain dead boring, I decided to play DPS after the hitbox changes. The amount of times where I would do a double take when I was playing Cass because I landed shots I definitely should not have was astounding. Blizzard's goal of making the game easier and more rewarding for shooting in a person's general direction felt great. For like 3 days. I started to learn Echo and found her to be the most fun DPS character. I would play her as much as possible until the enemy team would start counter-swapping and playing heroes that made it more difficult to get value. I experienced firsthand what it was like to play DPS against all the raw healing, high health pools, and immortality abilities, and it was such an awful feeling. It eventually led to defaulting to a hitscan character in order to get any value from DPS, because hitscan was much easier than projectile. Now I didn't say hitscan was easy, just easier in comparison to the projectile heroes. Every fight and exchange became the same loop. 2 tanks with 1000 HP blasting each other, supports pumping out heals, completely overriding any playmaking, and DPS just shooting down main with burst damage heroes and hoping the enemy doesn't use immortalities. With all the hitbox and health pool changes, Orisa, Hog, and Mauga became the 3 most played tanks with insane HP and passive mitigation. And this felt way more egregious than any tank heavy comp ever was in Overwatch 1. The only difference between then and now is that now you get hit markers when you shoot the unkillable tanks, so you can pad your stats and flame your teammates, pretending you are doing a lot for the team. None of this was fun. On top of that, queue times are just as bad as they were in Overwatch 1, even at the middle ranks. I'm waiting at least 10 minutes for a game in gold DPS. Also, quick play fucking sucks in this game. Whenever I would wait for my buddies to get on so we would queue comp, I'd jump into quick play just to mess around. A quick play has gotten so much sweatier it defeats the entire purpose of the mode. People are counter-swapping even in quick play and flame each other when things go wrong. Quick play in Overwatch 1 was way more relaxing and enjoyable. Why is quick play sweatier than comp? I never cared for PvE, so I would play a maximum of 3 or 4 games when a new PvE event came out. I don't care much for cosmetics either, but the shot seems to be the only thing that was added to Overwatch 2. The rank system, although better than the previous one, still is not as good as the old SR system. Overwatch 2 took away more features than they added, so now, what's the point of even calling it a sequel? The reason why I made this video in the first place is because I watch and listen to a lot of streamers and content creators in the Overwatch scene. I enjoy the conversations about how to improve the game because I played this game for so many years, I want it to be good as well. I want to be excited to log on again. But when it came to the 5v5 versus 6v6 conversation, things started getting really out of hand. Many 5v5 advocates argue that people who want 6v6 back are just blinded by nostalgia and rose-tinted glasses. Real quick side note by the way, I need the Overwatch community to learn something new to say because I swear to God, a lot of you only heard of this phrase during these debates and use it for every argument like it's on your word of the day calendar and it's going out of style. It's not rose-tinted glasses for wanting a game that I actually had fun with back, compared to the miserable experience I'm having now that was forced onto me and I didn't ask for. A lot of these individuals saying these things are also talking about things that didn't actually happen at the average ranks, and we're speaking on behalf of and putting words in the mouths of players like me. And that is really what motivated me to talk about this. I'm definitely not the most skilled player, but for a game that I was really invested in and want to see improve, it did not sit well with me when people tried to speak for people like me. And now, for my scorching hot nuclear take that a lot of people will not like. Overwatch 2 has become too accessible. It is far too easy to pick a hero and get massive value at the skill floor that everyone now thinks they're playing the right way by padding their stats, leading to too many differences in opinions and a lack of productive conversations. I stated earlier that I am not a DPS player, even lesser so a hit scan player. Anytime I would play DPS, I would choose projectile heroes. So for me to pick up Cass and get insane value just by existing and pointing in a general direction should not happen when I very much know what my weaknesses are. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be easy heroes that anyone can pick up, but what I am saying is heroes that are that easy should not get immense value at all ranks just for existing. Punish windows are slowly being removed one after another. Moira being able to fade in Cole, Roadhog keeping Vape and Whole Hog even when stunned, characters getting passive damage resistance or just flat out ignoring CC in general. These changes ignore the fundamentals of Overwatch and makes the game much less thought-provoking to play. Why am I getting punished with a 20% heal reduction on support for taking damage? Why am I getting punished for shooting a tank in the head and dealing less damage? These blanket passive changes are such oversights that don't affect each hero equally, and I'm tired of the argument that this is better than nothing, because that just means we are settling for mediocrity. This leads to a homogenizing of character designs and gameplay loops, where nowadays you never see crazy specialists anymore, aside from a few TikTok clips here and there. There are no more players like Shadowburn or EQO on Genji anymore, no Miro or Fisher on Winston, no Ryu Jae-hong or Jonax on support. It's become almost impossible to differentiate between who was really good at playing the game and who was good because of the game.
As you're about to see with the Infrasight and nailed the shots, not many Widowmakers would go for this play.
Yeah, but Pinewood,
And he just absolutely nails it here. Even the machine gun, what a flick!
Are
And
you
another one,
serious?
beautiful!
this guy's a living highlight reel, man. And NYXL gets some stability on defense, and that's a bit more, but Dosen.
This also leads to the skill of the general player base declining more and more as these abilities and changes continue to be implemented. Most of the player base is bad at the game, myself included, but making the game more accessible just by ignoring the fundamentals of the game does not nurture a competitive game. Every time the dev team put out an update blog or video and say that Overwatch is a highly competitive game, I have to laugh and wonder if we're looking at the same game, because all these passive benefits are detrimental to players improving. Overwatch itself is so much smaller than many other games that are popular nowadays. League of Legends, Fortnite, Apex, Valorant, you name it. These are games that are discussed far more often than Overwatch. The only time when Overwatch is discussed in media is when they do something wrong, so already Overwatch is at a massive disadvantage. Now, within the Overwatch community itself, the conversation has become so divisive between the community that we're now seeing language and arguments of comparing certain in-game communities to Andrew Tate fans, flat earthers, and page shills. The conversations happening about this video game is becoming comparable to online debates about politics, and it's so embarrassing I don't even want to be a part of it anymore. It's like the Simpsons meme, where the Overwatch community is the two monkeys fighting each other, while the rest of the gaming industry watches and cheers them on. This isn't even about the game anymore. For some reason, it's gotten so intensely personal, it seems like people are more concerned about being right than actually compromising and finding ways to improve the game. But that can't happen when there are posts going around such as, how do we improve the game without talking about 6v6? Excluding a very viable option is counterproductive, and I don't know why we're acting as if 6v6 isn't an option. None of us even imagined 5v5 as an option, but since we're here now, we're acting as if we're not allowed to go back. This whole rules for thee but not for me mentality is a really good way to summarize these arguments. Additionally, the development team have been completely radio silent about this issue as well, and I'm very confident they are aware of the conversations taking place. If Blizzard came out today and said, we are not going back to 66, that would be totally okay with me, because then I know the direction of the game isn't for me and I can move on. But by staying quiet, you'll leave a lot of people in the dark and unsure of its future. People aren't sure whether or not they should stick around or even believe that it can get better. I've seen many streamers having more fun playing games during their queues than playing the actual game. There are conversations taking place about big creators branching off from Overwatch and exploring other games and communities. And honestly, I really think they should, because I believe Overwatch has hit its potential a long time ago. The game doesn't respect the time and effort I put into it because I'm at the mercy of the balance patch and hero designs. The community scene doesn't seem to respect my time and effort either, because my feelings and experiences are being downplayed, watered down to being nostalgia pilled. And the content creator scene is just becoming high school cliques now. The game has nothing else to offer for me personally, so I would rather know for sure if 6v6 wasn't happening so I can move on to a different game, rather than twiddling my thumbs and hoping that the next patch will make my role slightly more fun because, let's be honest, in an asymmetrical format, balance is next to impossible. Look at games like Evolve and Dead by Daylight. Those games are also an asymmetrical format, where you would have 4 hunters or survivors versus 1 monster or killer respectively. If one side felt too strong, the other side had to be buffed, but then the same issue would repeat itself over and over. This is the issue that Overwatch is facing as well. You cannot buff one role without it coming at the expense of another. This is unironically on par with mobile game levels of power creep and balancing. In 6v6, this becomes easier to do. It's not perfect, it's not the end-all be-all solution to all of our problems, and it certainly will have problems as well, but it is way more manageable in an evenly numbered format than an asymmetrical one. I make this comparison a lot when I see games whose community is in flames. Final Fantasy XIV, for those of you who don't know, is a monthly subscription MMORPG and has one of the most incredible development teams and communities I've ever seen. I want to give a really brief breakdown of the game's history because I think a lot of companies today could stand to learn a lot from the steps Final Fantasy XIV took to improving their game. When the game first came out, it was a mess. The game was unintuitive, clunky, and a lot of designs made no sense. The lead developers were relying on the Final Fantasy name alone to sell the game. They did not look at their competitors, they rested on the laurels of their past successes, and ignored a lot of the community's outcry. Then comes in a replacement to the lead director by the name of Naoki Yoshida. Long story short, he came in, played the 1.0 version of Final Fantasy XIV, said it sucked, and gave Square Enix 2 options. 1. They either continue patching the mediocre game until it was no longer sustainable, shut down the game, and tarnishing the Final Fantasy name forever. Or 2. Take the L now, tell the community that the game sucks, apologize, and revamp the game.
No matter how much they patched Final Fantasy XIV Online, they couldn't ever fix it. What they'd have to do was something that no developer had ever done, to rebuild an entire MMO while the original version was still running.
I don't think that they realized immediately that it was something that couldn't be solved via patches. I think they still believe that, if we patch it, it'll be fine. And it wasn't until they reevaluated and then brought in, the new blood. Yoshida-san came in and told them, okay, yeah, this is not something that can be patched. If we want to fix this, we're going to have to take a drastic step.
Plan A and Plan B. During this meeting, he explained that Plan A would be to patch the game and make it more playable, but that ultimately the game would never really satisfy players, and though Square Enix may make their money back, the damage to the online brand would be catastrophic.
Seeing as they didn't have much of a choice, the company chose the latter. They kept the original game online and patched it while working on a new 2.0 version of the game, and it has now become one of the most successful MMORPGs in the gaming sphere. This decision was very much a gamble, and no modern day company would take it, but I wanted to bring this up because it can work, and it starts at the top. Even though I spent all this time talking about the game, my history and passion for it, as well as my experiences, I've gotten to the point where I'm not even angry or frustrated anymore, because that would mean I still had passion for Overwatch. But I just don't. The opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. And honestly, I think that's the point I'm at right now. For so long, I wanted to hold out for this game to be what I loved. Patch after patch, season after season, but now, with everything I spoke about in this video, I'm just tired. The game is a soulless and hollow shell of what I loved, and is being treated like nothing is wrong. The community of passionate and competitive players is dwindling. There's just nothing left to get excited about anymore. We don't get cinematics or origin stories, ranked rewards are awful and way overdue, most of the decent skins are put behind a paywall. The list goes on and on. I hope I'm proven wrong and this game really does become good and enjoyable again. But I'm just tired of the journey that seems to be leading to nowhere. I don't think the game will die at all, but if we continue on this path, I fear that this game is just doomed to settling for mediocrity. If you still enjoy this game, that's totally fine. I have no problems with that. This is just how I feel and I don't want anyone else speaking for me. I mentioned earlier that the only way to enjoy this game seems to be checking if your role or hero is overpowered, and if not, just wait for the next patch, as if you're being paid or bribed just to play this game. So, before I wrap this up, I just want to leave Blizzard with one question. If the world could always use more heroes, why are you making one for mercenaries? If you made it to the end here, thank you so much for listening to the ramblings of a mediocre Overwatch boomer. It really does mean a lot. This is just a culmination of my frustrations with the game over the years, and I just reached my breaking point with holding out for this game and wanted to put my thoughts out there for others to hopefully relate to. I'm still quite new to content creation, and by no means do I consider myself an Overwatch creator, but if you still enjoyed, I'd really appreciate if you liked and subscribed. I also stream on Twitch every night where I play a lot of different RPGs. I'd totally be down to talk about Overwatch if you decided to stop by, but for now, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to y'all soon.